Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
I would anticipate that legislation like that is something that I would be looking to look at more in the long session as opposed to the short sessions.
This is Under the Dome. On today's episode, we're taking a look at what's happening in the North Carolina General Assembly short session for the week of May 23rd, 2022.
For the News and Observer, I'm Vaughan, your host for this episode of Under the Dome for Monday, May 23rd. I'm here with Will Doran, and we're going to give you the legislative preview because the short session has arrived. Short in quotation marks.
We'll see. Last year last multiple years, they were in for over a year. Usually the long session, it is the long session, but, it'll be 7, 8, 9 months. They were in for 13 or 14 months last time. So I think people are really eager to not be in Raleigh for too long this spring. Plus, we have an election coming up in November. People got to hit the road, start knocking on doors, raising money.
I think that's a big factor is the people that control the calendar. How much do they want to be out campaigning for themselves or for others, since a lot of the leadership in the General Assembly is basically already back for next year because no one's running against them. So, but there will be some legislation. Will, you've been around a few more legislative years than I have. Tell me what people should know about the difference between the long session and the short session, just procedurally, and what they have to do.
Sure. So the long session, which is always in the odd-numbered years, obviously happened last year, and that's when you kind of do the heavy lifting. You pass your 2-year budget, you do a lot of the kind of bigger political fights or really complicated bills then. And then the short session in the even-numbered years, which is where we're at now, is when you kind of make some tweaks to the budget, any sort of issues that come up you'll deal with, but it's really all about triage. And especially now when they're saying they only want to be in probably 5 or 6 weeks is actually what House Speaker Tim Moore told us is, they're probably planning on being out by July at some point. Now obviously, famous last words, right? We'll see if they actually meet that deadline. But, it's all about figuring out, okay, what is just the absolute most important stuff that we need to do? And so we know that they'll do the budget. How much bandwidth are they going to have to do other stuff beyond the budget, whether that's, medical marijuana or, any sort of other reforms or changes they want to make. That, stuff like that might be a little bit of a tougher push. And
there's the local bills, which, if you all are looking at bill filings, that's a lot of what came out the first few days. So session already began the morning or noon after the primary the night before, and it was just skeletal sessions. Speaker Moore was there. Will and I and other press corps reporters were there, and Speaker Moore gave us a few indications of what things are going to look like this session. So let's go through kind of the big ones that people can expect, starting with my favorite topic and everyone's, the state budget. So the big thing about that is, we already saw Governor Cooper's proposal a little over 2 weeks ago about what he's hoping for, and he wants more raises for state employees and teachers. And they're already going to get a raise this year because, like what Will said about the budget being a 2-year spending plan, this is the second half of that, and it's 2.5% is what it's what state employees are going to get. It's on average what teachers are going to get. That'll be different for some teachers. So that's coming no matter what, because that's already law. So what would happen in this budget bill, this smaller budget bill on the off year, would be maybe some more. Now, is that going to be recurring raises? Is that going to be a bonus? Is that going to be something, We're not sure exactly what they're going to do yet. We don't know. But the big news is that Republicans do want to give state employees and teachers more money on the House side anyway. We'll see what the Senate says. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah, the House is always a little bit more pro-spending than the Senate is. The big thing here with this budget is, as you wrote, what was it, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, Don, that we have $6.5 billion more than we expected to have this year. So, it's not like they're just kind of like bored and trying to like figure out like things to change around. Like they've got several $1 billion to figure out what to do with. And so, giving more money for raises could be something, funding, more capital projects, construction work on like roads or at universities, that could be in the cards. And then, of course, potential some sort of, I think, tax relief was the word that House Speaker Tim Moore used with us. So it could be a tax cut. It could be like a one-time sort of stimulus or rebate sort of check. He wasn't really giving a whole lot of details. What did you take from his conversation on the taxes?
He said he didn't want it to be a gimmick, but I mean, if it's money and, going back to people, then maybe that's not as much a gimmick. I guess it is if you present it in a way of, you want the political win of, look, I'm giving you your tax money back, or I'm giving money to something else in some way. Obviously, Democrats, policy interest-wise, they want to spend more on education. Of course, with the Leandro factor and other things, then tax relief. Republicans have priority for tax relief, whether that's individuals, whether that's more of corporate tax relief. We don't know yet. So that's something that we'll figure out. The other thing about the budget, and Speaker Moore said this to the representatives that were in the House on opening day, that he used the phrase, I believe, reverse engineering as far as the budget this time, and do a conference report ahead of time. And what that means is that it's up or down vote. They already decided behind closed doors. And there's already plenty of behind closed doors with last year's budget cycle as far as everything coming together. But this might be even more so. And then when it comes for a vote, that's you take it or leave it. And we'll see how that goes. So the Republicans right now are deciding, what they want to do. Moore said that there will be Democrats involved. He doesn't know yet if it's going to be the same budget conferees as last year. So we'll see about that. So there's definitely going to be some sort of spending bill this session. The other things that we asked about him that is like maybe brighter on people's radar is medical marijuana, if that's going to happen. And Moore said, no. I've also heard from others that it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Not that anyone opposes it in general, but that there are things they don't like about it that's going to take more time to actually write that bill, and they don't feel like doing it in the short session.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, Don. There are definitely people who oppose it. We've been covering it so it's in the Senate so far. So, we're talking here with Tim Moore, who's the Speaker of the House. The House hasn't even gotten the bill from the Senate. So he's really just kind of avoided talking about it in general because, why bother, saying something about a potentially controversial bill that his people don't even have to vote on yet. In the Senate, every Democrat is on board, and the Republican caucus is kind of a mixed bag. You've got some people who are for it, some people who are very much against it, specifically really kind of the more religious right is opposed to it. And then you have some people who are just kind of in the middle and trying to figure out kind of, what their home district thinks about it. And they don't really know, maybe they've got an open mind, but they're skeptical. They're just trying to figure out which way to flip.
There are key Republican players, though, that are for it. And that's really what it comes down to, though, don't you think? Or
yes.
It's a matter of the total vote count?
There are also some key Republicans who are against it. Although actually one of them is about to leave. One of the main opponents was Chuck Edwards, who is now going to Congress, probably.
Well, he'll be here this year still.
Yeah, he'll be around this year. But starting in 2023, if the medical marijuana bill waits until next year, then you've got one of the big opponents will be gone one way or the other. Either he'll just be out of office or he'll be in Congress. But either way, he won't be there. That
is an interesting factor. I think with who is around next time, the other big thing that I think obviously nationally and the leaked Roe versus Wade draft ruling. and what that means for who's in the legislative building this year versus who's in it next year. So, Will, you wrote about that this past week. Tell us what Moore said and the context that people need to have.
Yeah, so obviously abortion is a huge national topic right now. And so that was one of the main questions we had for Speaker Moore. It's like, okay, it looks like the Supreme Court is going to tell states, all right, y'all get to decide whatever abortion restrictions you want, have at it. And so we said, okay, what's North Carolina going to do? And he was very frank and honest and basically just said, well, I don't think we're going to do anything right now because we've got a Democratic governor who we basically know from past experience of them having tried to pass a couple abortion bills in recent years. It's just going to get vetoed. And so here's some audio from that conversation we had with Speaker Moore when we asked him that question.
There's a timing issue. I mean, we're going to be here for a short period to deal with the budget. The politics, frankly, is that we have a governor that I know would veto any legislation, and we don't have a supermajority. I also am concerned, frankly, about our current state Supreme Court. If you're talking about a court that's talking about striking down a constitutional amendment on voter ID, I have no confidence in this current majority on the state Supreme Court to follow the law.
So we'll find out next week when things ramp up. And timeline-wise, Moore told us that it's looking at 5 to 6 weeks. I believe Senate Leader Berger told AP reporter Gary Robertson the same thing recently. What do you, should we make a bet on what that timeline actually is?
I would put the over-under at the third week of July.
Yeah, because they'll probably want to take some time off around the 4th of July. And
yeah, people will be gone for the 4th, but then they could come back for a couple weeks after that to kind of finish things up. And I don't think that they will be here in August, although they have certainly proved me wrong on on their willingness to stay late before. So we'll see. Yeah,
we don't really know, So... All right, so those are kind of the big issues that are on our radar and all of y'all's, and then, there's always going to be some surprises and getting amends and that sort of thing. So that's, stay tuned. Now we'll have our picks for Headliner of the Week. I'm going to go, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so hopefully Will doesn't have the same one that I have, but I just had a couple stories, in-depth story and some sidebar stories about the state of the state employee in North Carolina. And like, any other job, there's a lot of turnover lately, including in state government, and they're definitely hiring. We talk about all these big companies coming here and all the incentives to bring them here and all the jobs that are coming, but there's a whole bunch of jobs here too, and there's some trouble filling them. And the state workers themselves have a lot of ideas for what could be done to improve that. The short answer is money. Anyway, so my headliner is actually not the current state worker, but the retired state worker, because I mentioned a little bit about retirees and those stories, but I heard from some after that saying, what about us? And they weren't happy with the COLA bonuses they had gotten previously. And then even just writing about Speaker Moore, talking about the chances in this summer's budget bill, people saying, what about, don't forget the retirees. So my headliner of the week is the retired state employee. What's yours, Will?
I think mine is going to be Democratic State Senator Kirk Devier. Who you've written a lot about, Don. He lost his primary last week to a challenger who was funded and endorsed by Governor Cooper, who was not too happy about his work with some of the Republicans last year in 2021 on the budget. But as we said, now we've got a new budget process coming up, and now, I think it's going to kind of be an open question over whether, does he, stick loyal with the Democrats on some bills where they need his vote if there is something, that comes up, whether it's on the budget or something else that the Republicans pass and Cooper vetoes. They're not too many votes away from the supermajority in the Senate. So a few votes here or there could really, make or break whether or not Cooper's veto can stand up. And it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, we've seen, in the past, with like Dwayne Hall, when he lost his primary, he voted with Republicans on a couple things. Joel Ford, when he lost his primary, he sponsored the voter ID bill that now his Republicans appointed to say hey, look, we have a Democratic sponsor on voter ID too. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of the role that Senator DeVere plays here, whether he stays loyal with the Democratic Party or kind of starts hanging out with the Republicans a little bit more on some issues.
I did notice the day after the election, DeVere put out, his campaign email saying that one priority still that he has this year is Medicaid expansion, which he said, even during budget negotiations, that was still a priority. And it was the House Republicans that ended up stalling that out, according to House Republicans. So we'll see. And he certainly wasn't the only Democrat in either chamber who voted for the earlier versions of the budget, because that's how they got a seat at the table. So I'd asked Moore this week, what about, is it going to be the same Democrats being part of this process? And he said, he doesn't know yet. So that will be something else for us to check out.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we're in an election year. Do not think that there won't be, politically tinged items getting put into the budget or getting passed on their own, that's going to, be intended to set up ads in November, essentially. And some of those dynamics are going to be really fascinating to watch whether or not those go through.
For sure. And as we talked about in our post-election bonus episode a few days ago, a lot of people are moving up ballot or hoping to get in office in Washington. So I think there'll be maybe a slightly different type of floor speech election year. So anyway. All right. Well, thanks for listening. This is Dawn Vaughan, and for Will Doran with the News and Observer. We'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.